Hello, this is Doug at Wood Spun Round. It is so good to have you in the shop yet one more time. What we've got here is a walnut log. This is about just a little over 8 by about 4.5, thereabouts. And we're going to try to turn a little vase. Let's see if it's going to work out. Just deciding which end is going to be up and which is going to be down here and how I'm going to mount it to begin with. Let's start off with a stem center. It won't be long. We're going to start off here with a roughing gouge and just begin to knock the bark off and get into the wood. But I won't get very far, and I start to slip. That's the problem with stem centers, especially with a real rough piece of wood. Sometimes it can start slipping on you. But it began slipping so bad, and I could not tighten it up any longer, so I changed over to a 4-prong drive center. That's what you saw me put in just then. Got it back between centers, and there are a couple of cracks. Those are the two worst ones right there, and they go plumb into the center of the pith, and so we'll have to deal with those here in a little while. Just getting put back together and finished getting it around. Now I'm going to use my Easy Wood rougher, the CI1, to square the ends. Once I get both ends square, I'm going to come back to this end where I'm at now and put the tenon on there. Just taking a couple passes, making sure I'm all square. Both ends were quite crooked. Have to move the tail or the tool rest so I can get the end on the headstock. Again, just a couple of light passes, and the end is nice and square. Come back down to the other end up by the tailstock and put the recess in there. Just less than half of the cutter here. I'll turn around and do a second cut, again less than half, just to make sure I've got plenty. I'm going to use some heavy bowl jaws. They're still 50 millimeter jaws, 2-inch jaws in the Minova chuck, but they're much longer, much heavier, have gripper teeth all the way down on the inside. So I make my tenon just not any bigger in diameter, but just a hair longer than what I normally do. These jaws are also on a different chuck. They're on the GI3, I believe it is, not the original. Just using the skew there to give that top end just a little bit of an indentation so that the top tooth has something to sink into. I flipped it around in the chuck, and what I'm doing there is just using the parting tool to give myself a mark on the bottom. That's going to be at the very most, it's going to be the bottom edge of my vase that I'm going to make. Pulled out my 1/2-inch bowl gouge. This is my Doug Thompson 1/2-inch bowl gouge. That's my tool of choice. Thought I might give myself a little bit of a layout line just to get a shape in my head or some divisions in my head. And that's going to be the center of a cove. I'll end up turning that mark away here in just a minute, but I know roughly where it is. Beginning here to form the bottom, I'm just going to round off the bottom. This piece of walnut's been sitting around in the shop for a number of years. I can't tell you how long I've had it. I think I brought this with me when I moved into this house and put this shop together. That would mean that this log is over 8 years old. I may have had it 9 years. It's been sitting in the shop floor all that time. So it's pretty hard. Walnut is hard anyway. but this one seems to be particularly hard. You can kind of tell there I've moved this cove, the center of the cove, up just a little bit from where I'd put that pencil line. Kind of changed my mind just a little bit on how I wanted to turn this. Here I'm just working downhill both sides. This log is in spindle orientation, as you saw, and so I want to literally cut downhill on the outside. That way I have supporting grain underneath my cut. And so I'm going to work from both sides, working down to the bottom of this cove. I want to make sure I've got a nice round curve on both sides of this cove as well. I don't want it curved on one side and flat on the other side. I want a nice curve that blends together in the very bottom of this cove. Don't want any interruptions. And so that's what I'm kind of doing here. I'm just kind of working on it, trying to get a nice transition in the bottom and still have two nice curves going down to the bottom. Got that accomplished, and before we move around to the inside, I'm going to go ahead and do most of the sanding. I will come back and do more sanding later, but I wanted to do the biggest part of it. In fact, I go all the way from 60 grit all the way to 320 grit right there. And then I don't bother with any finish yet. I have turned it around, or turned it. I've turned my headstock toward me, just one indent. And I'm starting to work on the inside. I've drilled myself a pilot hole, and I would move the camera around. In fact, I started to do that, but I can hardly see in there. I know you would not be able to. Even though I've got this extra light, this is a new LED light that I've got. Haven't used it but a couple of times, but this one here it works really well. It's not as bright as some, but I've switched over to the carbide and the Easy Wood tool, and it's doing quite well getting that piece hollowed out. But I got it done, got it where I'm about 3/8 all the way down. Now I'm going to sand for a little while, just some repair in some of those cracks that were at the top, some glue, sawdust, those kinds of things, and then sanding all that down. Finished sanding, so now I'm going to clean it. I've blown it all off good, but now I'm going to put some denatured alcohol on a paper towel and give it a good wash down with this alcohol. That'll get out remaining dust that's down in those pores and in the cracks. Just helps the finish later on. The finish will sometimes look a little muddy, a little milky, but this way, by getting the sawdust off of there, that little fine sanding dust, the finish will be clearer and look a bit brighter. So that's why I do it. Didn't always do this, take this step, and learned this in the last couple of years, and it's really helped my finishes, brought them up a good bit. I put sanding sealer on, or I'm about to put sanding sealer on, but because the alcohol raised the grain, I'm just using the Scotch-Brite pad here, smooth it all out. And I'll do it again after the sanding sealer and it dries. It's a little bit of an extra step, but again, I think it makes a bit of a difference when you take that just a few seconds. But we'll put the sanding sealer on and then let it dry, and while it's drying, I'll get ready and have my Scotch-Brite ready again and go ahead and knock the nibs down, any of those grain pieces that come up after the sanding sealer. Speaking of finishing products and process, just a reminder, I am now a representative. I'm sponsored by Axe Wood Paste. I really like those. I've been using the Axe products for quite a while now, and really like them. And just recently was talking with the folks there at Axe, and they could use another spokesperson. So I offered my services, and we talked a little bit, and decided that I would do that. So if you want to try the Axe products, when you get to checkout there in the checkout code, put Doug15, and that'll save you 15% on your Axe products. I'm just buffing off the abrasive paste here. This abrasive paste, I sand all the way to 320. I use the abrasive paste, rub it in by hand at first, and then start my lathe up slow at about 200, 250, and just work that in. And as I feel the grip break down, I can hear it, it gets quieter, but also I can feel it, it gets much smoother. I start speeding up the lathe, and I'll wipe it off bit by bit. I'll speed up the lathe a little bit, turn my paper towel, speed up the lathe, turn my paper towel, and then when my paper towel comes off clean, I know that it's done. We've gone to the polishing and restoring paste here, and this is a carnauba-based wax. Very good wax. It's better now than what I'm using. This that I'm using I've had it for quite a while. Just recently, Tom has announced that he's adding twice as much carnauba as what he was putting in. I don't know what his ratios are. I haven't asked. He hasn't told me. But I know that he's putting twice as much carnauba into the mixture as what he was putting in. And so it should be even better than what it is now. Right here, it's going on. It goes on, what I've got goes on extremely soft and wet. And then it kind of sets up, and when it does, that's when you can really start buffing it. Here I'm buffing. This is at the end of the buffing process. I buff it for quite a while because I like to get as much of the shine out of it as possible. Wax isn't a super high gloss anyway, but it looks shiny right there. It's not quite as shiny in person as that, but it still looks great. Time to take the nub off the bottom. Need to take the tenon and the nub off. So I've turned this little stem, and I'm going to keep this thing for future use. I've had to make several of these in the past, and was just thinking, let's just keep it. So I'm going to keep this one. Just turned it from basically a limb that was sitting around, putting the tailstock in the existing location where it was to begin with when I turned the tenon to begin with. So it's going to be lined up quite well just from doing that. Bringing my tailstock up, I'm going to turn it by hand, and I'm just putting my thumbnail up to the tenon. Yes, it's pretty square. I'm going to turn off that little waste bit and all the way down to the tenon. The tenon I'm actually going to remove, but most of that waste bit I'm going to leave it on there and just continue the curve. You see that portion I'm sanding now. That just continued the curve that I had started all the way down, except for the tenon. The tenon was removed. I've sanded it. I've put on some sanding sealer here. Want it finished like all the rest of the vase is. So we're going with the sanding sealer on the side, on the bottom as well. I've already cut my 3 rings in the bottom like I normally do. I will come back, I'll use the Axe abrasive paste. I'll also use the polishing paste as well, just to give it the same shine, the same texture, everything that the rest of it has. Don't forget, if you would like to try the Axe wood paste, do put Doug15 at the checkout code there, and you'll get 15% off, and that helps the channel a little bit. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, I'd love for you to. It doesn't cost you anything. There's no charge, nothing. You just hit the little subscribe button. There will be a bell that'll pop up. Click on that bell, and if you want to be notified every time that I put a new video on YouTube, hit the notification button there. That bell is notification bell, but you'll also want to hit the all. You click on the button on the bell and then click all, and they'll let you know every time I put a new video up. There you see I'm putting on the abrasive paste, and it'll be followed up by the polishing and restoring paste. The other thing that you can do to help out the channel, besides liking, subscribing, two other things. One is you can go in the comment section, just add a comment and just say hi, or tell me how much you like the vase and the turning, or maybe you didn't like it. You know, you might want to hit the thumb down button, the dislike button. But tell me, if there's something I did or didn't do that you'd like me to do the next time or not to do. Maybe it's something that annoys you. That's okay too. And honestly, I understand. I'm not going to be the guy to watch for everybody. And so some people just don't enjoy watching my videos. That's okay. Some people don't like the voiceovers. I've gotten a lot of great feedback from the voiceovers. They like being able to hear the machines running in the background, but they also like to hear my voice just as well. But I can tell you the voiceover helps me to get these videos down shorter. That was my biggest problem when I first started. But then my greatest the greatest negative comment was my videos were too long. They were an hour plus. Now I definitely less than 30 minutes. This one will be just under 20 minutes. That's where I like to keep them, under 20 minutes. Right there, I'm just removing that final nub, going Phil Anderson style. Got a little nervous at the very end. I didn't want it to go flying and get beat up or anything, so I pulled it off just before it broke loose. Tailstock out of the way, slide it off that post. There's that little nub, and it'll break right off. There it goes. Now I'll do just a little sanding on that center, and once I've sanded it, again, I'll come back. I did some abrasive paste just by hand, and here's the wax, applying it by hand as well. And I'll give it a nice buff, more off the camera than anything. Even put a little on the top end. Actually dropped this twice. Once on the rubber mat that I'm standing on, but then one time it fell over on the other side of the lathe, on the front side of the lathe. And I'm not sure where it landed because it didn't leave any marks. But it was not on the rubber mat. So I'm real happy. I had some shavings there, and that probably cushioned it enough. Just a little bit of hand buffing at the very end. I may even go back and buff it just a little bit with my Bill buffers just to bring up that shine. But I'll probably wait till tomorrow to do that. Blowing out a little residual dust. Let's put the wax away before we drop it and get shavings all in there. And there you have it. Be sure to stick around and watch the stills here in just a moment. Thanks for being with me. This is Doug, and until we meet again, I hope you're able to spin them round.